You know when two people clearly hate each other, but they pretend to be civil at family events? That's kind of the vibe between Iran and Israel, except instead of awkward glances over dinner, it's missiles, militias, and decades of shadow wars. Fun, right? So let's break it down. Why the heck do Iran and Israel hate each other? Is it personal, political, religious? Yes, it's all of the above. Let's rewind the tape a bit. Once upon a time, aka pre-1979, Iran and Israel were actually kind of cool with each other. Iran wasn't a democracy, still isn't, but it was run by the Shah, a Western-friendly monarch who wore snazzy suits and liked oil money. Israel and the Shah's Iran had low-key diplomatic relations, traded stuff, even shared some intelligence. You know, classic, we don't talk about this publicly type of relationship. Then 1979 happened, and boom, everything flipped. The Iranian Revolution brought in Ayatollah Khomeini and turned Iran into a theocratic state, basically a government run by religious leaders. And these guys were not fans of Israel. Why? Because from their point of view, Israel is a Western-backed occupier of Muslim land, and the United States, Israel's BFF, is the Great Satan. Yes, that's the actual nickname. Not very subtle. So from that moment, Iran's official stance became Israel should not exist, full stop. Which, you know, tends to kill any hopes for a chill relationship. Meanwhile, Israel was like, okay, noted. Also, we're gonna keep existing. Thanks! And so began this decades-long Cold War-style tension. Not a full-blown war, but lots of side-eye, threats, proxy battles, cyber attacks, and the occasional explosion no one officially claims responsibility for. Now, here's where it gets more complicated. Iran didn't just say, we don't like Israel, and move on. They started funding and arming groups that also don't like Israel. We're talking Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Islamic Jihad, Houthis in Yemen, basically a tour package of anti-Israel militias. Iran sends them money, weapons, and training, and in return, these groups poke Israel with rockets, drones, and tunnel warfare. Israel, of course, responds. Sometimes loudly, sometimes silently, but they've hit Iranian targets in Syria, blown up nuclear scientists inside Iran, allegedly, and launched cyber attacks on Iran's infrastructure. It's like that one neighbor feud where they don't talk, but one guy mysteriously has a broken sprinkler and the other ends up with a hacked Wi-Fi. And then there's the nuclear issue. Iran says they're enriching uranium for peaceful purposes, like, you know, energy. Israel says, yeah, sure, and I eat salad for fun. They're not buying it. Israel has been very clear. A nuclear Iran is a red line, and they've hinted they'll take military action if needed. So now we've got religious tension, political tension, proxy wars, cyber warfare, nuclear threat. It's basically the create your own doomsday starter pack. And to make it spicier, there's the United States, because of course, the US is Israel's strongest ally, giving them billions in military aid, diplomatic support, and very few questions asked. Meanwhile, the US has had a love-hate, on-again, off-again situationship with Iran since the 70s. There were sanctions, then nuclear deals, then canceled nuclear deals, then more sanctions, and a lot of angry press conferences in between. Every time tensions rise between Iran and Israel, the US ends up dragged in. Because if Iran attacks Israel directly, or if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear sites, guess who Iran blames too? That's right, the US. And suddenly, it's not just two countries yelling at each other, it's a regional, possibly global mess. Now fast forward to today, recent escalations include Iranian proxies launching missiles at Israel from multiple directions, Israel hitting back harder, and both sides talking big game on live TV. Plus, tensions are flaring up in places like Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and the Red Sea, all connected in this giant spiderweb of hostility. And while politicians throw around words like restraint and de-escalation, their armies are mobilizing, militias are firing, and civilians are, once again, caught in the middle. So yeah, are we on the brink of World War III? Not quite yet. But are we in one of the most dangerous standoffs of the 21st century? Oh, absolutely. And we haven't even gotten into what would happen if this thing spirals out of control and the US fully steps in. So, how exactly do the United States get dragged into a fight 6,000 miles away? Easy? Because we never left. Let's be honest, the US isn't just watching the fight between Iran and Israel like a neutral bystander. We've been the guy holding Israel's coat and saying, go get 'em, buddy, for decades. Billions in military aid, check. Missile defense systems, check. Air Force drills, double check. Moral support, vetoes at the UN, and presidential speeches about unbreakable bonds? Yeah, that too. So if this turns into an all-out war between Iran and Israel, guess who's getting a phone call real fast? That's right, Uncle Sam. Now, There are three ways the US can end up right in the middle of this mess. Option 1. Iran attacks US forces directly. Newsflash, the US has military bases all over the Middle East. Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, we're basically the Airbnb of military presence. And Iran knows that. If Iran or one of its proxy militias decides to target one of those bases with drones, rockets, or cyber attacks, boom, that's it. US enters the chat, not with words, but with Tomahawk missiles. And before you say, would they really do that? They already have multiple times. Iran-backed groups have attacked US positions in Syria and Iraq over the years. Sometimes the US retaliates. Sometimes we just issue a strongly worded press release. But in the middle of a wider war, retaliation becomes mandatory, politically, militarily, emotionally. Option 2, the US chooses to defend Israel directly. Let's say Israel gets hit hard, maybe with missiles from Lebanon, drones from Yemen, or even a direct strike from Iran. If the Israeli government feels overwhelmed and asks the US for backup, guess what? We're contractually and politically almost obligated to help. Presidents don't want to be remembered as the guy who let Israel burn. So we send jets, we send ships, we send troops, and suddenly it's not just a Middle East conflict anymore, it's a US war. And if you think Americans are tired of Middle East wars, you're right, but that's never stopped us before. Option 3, oil and global trade go kaboom. Here's a fun fact. A huge chunk of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically Iran's backyard. If things get spicy, Iran could block or threaten that route, something they've definitely threatened before. Global oil prices would skyrocket. Gas prices, $10 a gallon, easy. Cue panic in the markets, memes about biking to work, and angry people at gas stations blaming whoever's president. Now, when oil prices explode and the economy shivers, the US has two choices. 1, do nothing and hope it settles down. 2, send the Navy in and flex. Historically, we've picked option 2. So even without a direct attack, the US could enter the conflict to protect global trade and stabilize the region, which is government speak for don't touch our gas. And here's the wild card. Let's say Israel attacks Iran's nuclear facilities, something they've said they might do if they feel threatened. Iran responds with everything they've got. Suddenly, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, Iraq, everybody picks a side. The region turns into a full-on chaos buffet. And America? We're not watching this on Netflix. We're in it, whether by choice or because someone aimed a rocket a little too close to one of our bases. The real question, would the US actually go full war mode with boots on the ground, massive airstrikes, the works? Unlikely at first. But if Americans die, if oil prices keep soaring, if allies get involved, yeah, public opinion flips. Congress suddenly finds funding, and boom, we're back in another war with a coalition and a logo. And that's the scary part. Wars don't start with World War III headlines. They start with one drone, one base hit, one, we had to respond, and then it spirals. And if it spirals too far, all right, let's stop tiptoeing around the question everyone's thinking. If the US enters this conflict, is that World War III? Short answer, not yet. Long answer, it depends on who else decides to crash the party. Because let's be clear, a war between the US, Israel, and Iran, that's a massive regional war. But it only becomes World War III when other global powers decide, hey, I want in on this chaos. So let's walk through the how it all blows up checklist. Iran versus US, the direct clash. Once the US officially steps in, maybe after an attack on its forces or in defense of Israel, things escalate fast. Iran responds with missile strikes across the region. US bases in Iraq, Syria, and even the Gulf states could get hit. American troops are now directly in combat. Naval forces lock down the Persian Gulf. Airstrikes light up Tehran's military targets. The global oil market, full panic mode. Still regional, but unstable. Proxy mayhem, everybody joins the brawl. Iran doesn't fight alone. They've got proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq and Syria, and even potential help from Hamas in Gaza. They all start launching rockets at Israel. Israel retaliates with everything it's got. US provides air support and intelligence. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, who really don't like Iran, might quietly help the US or Israel behind the scenes. Iran could then hit them too. Suddenly, you've got 6 countries involved. Now we're cooking. What about Russia? Russia's like that guy in the corner of the bar who says, I'm not looking for a fight, but he definitely brought brass knuckles just in case. Moscow has a working relationship with Iran. They've cooperated in Syria. They both hate American sanctions. And if the US and Israel are busy in the Middle East, guess who gets more freedom to do whatever in Ukraine or Eastern Europe? Russia doesn't need to send troops to Iran. They can just use the chaos as cover and maybe throw in some weapons or intelligence support for Tehran. If the US calls that out, things get even hotter. And China? The quiet strategist. China doesn't want war. They want oil, trade routes, and global influence, not American missiles flying over tankers. But they're very close to Iran economically. And while they wouldn't jump in militarily, they could start backing Iran financially, politically, and diplomatically. And if the US starts sanctioning Chinese companies for dealing with Iran, guess what? China hits back economically. Now you've got war in the Middle East and a trade war with China. It's like ordering one crisis and getting 3 for free. What about Europe? Europe, bless their tired, stressed out souls, just wants everyone to calm down. But if US bases in Europe get involved, or if NATO is dragged in by alliance politics, you now have European forces in the mix. Some countries, like the UK and France, might support the US. Others would scream de-escalation while quietly sending weapons. Either way, the alliance system starts to look a lot like 1914. And the nuclear word. Let's say things get really dark. Iran, under massive pressure, says, "We're building the bomb." Israel says, "We're not letting that happen," and launches a preemptive strike. Iran hits back with everything, maybe even tries to block oil shipping entirely. The US ramps up with overwhelming force. Now Russia and China are on high alert. Nuclear arsenals don't need to be used. Just being on the table sends panic through global markets, governments, and TikTok conspiracy pages. Suddenly, World War III isn't a meme anymore. Reality check. Are we actually there yet? Not yet. Here's what's keeping things from going full apocalypse. Most countries don't want a war. Like, really don't. They've got inflation, elections, recession fears, and angry people on Twitter to deal with. Everyone knows what's at stake. Even the most trigger-happy generals understand that once certain lines are crossed, you don't come back. This isn't 1940. We've got satellites, drones, and cyber weapons. War looks very different. Full-scale global wars are horribly expensive, hard to control, and nobody wins. But if enough mistakes happen, if one missile hits the wrong target, if one leader overreacts, if one red line turns into a dare, yeah, we could end up in the biggest military crisis since World War II. So what now? Stay informed. Don't panic, but also don't ignore it. These tensions are real, and if it feels like things are getting faster, louder, and more dangerous, it's because they are. Whether this ends in backdoor diplomacy or something worse depends on a handful of decisions made by people in rooms you'll never see. Let's just hope those people have better impulse control than the internet. World War III won't start with a dramatic villain monologue. It'll start with confusion, a drone strike, a misunderstanding, and a chain of "we had no choice" reactions. That's why this stuff matters. If you made it to the end of this video, congrats. You now know more about global tension than 90% of your Instagram feed. Hit that like button, subscribe for more explanations that make the world slightly less confusing, and share this with that one friend who thinks WW3 is just a vibe. Because trust me, it's not a vibe, it's real. And it's happening. Let's hope it ends before it truly begins. So, what can Americans expect? If this war escalates, well, let's get real for a second. If this war between Iran and Israel turns into something bigger and the US jumps in with both boots, here's what the average American can expect. Gas prices? Say goodbye to anything under $5. That pickup truck you love? Hope you love selling kidneys too. Inflation. Welcome back to why is this cereal $12 now? Stock market? Picture a roller coaster designed by someone going through a divorce. Global shipping. Your Amazon package just entered its villain era. That 2-day Prime delivery? Try 2 months maybe. Cyber attacks. Yup, those too. Banks, airports, infrastructure. Nothing's off limits anymore. Military deployment? Thousands of US troops might get sent back to a region we just barely started pulling out of. News coverage? Wall-to-wall panic, hashtags, hot takes, and conspiracy theories with 3 million views in 4 hours. And let's not forget, election season is coming, and wars love to crash that party. So get ready for every politician to suddenly become a foreign policy expert overnight. But here's the thing. For most Americans, war doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with prices, fear, chaos online, and constant news alerts that feel like the world's about to implode. And the scariest part? The average person didn't ask for any of this. You just wanted to buy eggs, scroll TikTok, and maybe finally go on that road trip you planned 2 years ago. But now you've got to wonder, will this affect me? And the answer is, it already is. If you made it this far in the video, and first of all, congrats. You now officially know more about the Iran-Israel-US situation than most people yelling about it on Twitter. So here's the ask. Like the video if you learned something. Share it with a friend who thinks World War III is just a Call of Duty update. And subscribe for more breakdowns that turn complicated geopolitics into something even your uncle at Thanksgiving can understand. Because the world's on fire, and at the very least, you should know who's holding the matches. Stay informed, stay calm, and maybe, just maybe, don't trust everything you read in the comments. See you in the next one, or in the bunker, whichever comes first.